So since we're going to be tying a double uni knot, I definitely want to have two different types of rope / line to show you guys the difference in the technique. In this case, it's going to be my red yarn is going to be my leader line. The white string / yarn / whatever the heck this thing is going to be the equivalent of my braid. So they are different diameters, which is kind of the goal here. So as you're going along, just remember that white is braid, red is leader line, and just kind of tie according to. Let's get started. So let's get started with the actual knot tying. Just keep in mind, once again, white is my braid equivalent, red is my leader line. That is going to be important for you to remember as we get this started. So I'm going to take my main line, just like any uni knot, I'm going to loop it back around. Now the difference in this one is going to come from the fact that we're going to include both lines in the initial loop. I like to tie the main line first, mainly because it's easier to keep the knots together when you pull it tight later. I'll go over that in a second, or once I actually get to that point. But if you don't do it first, it can sometimes slip, and then you're kind of stuck there with a knot in your line, and you have to cut it free and start over again. So let's go ahead and grab this. So what we're going to do is we're going to come grab both lines together, as you guys can see. We're going to come around. So we're going to create that all-important loop, keeping both lines in it. And then what I like to do is I like to pinch at the part where it goes right behind them and bring my line through that way. So you're going to wrap around once, twice, just like you're doing a regular uni knot, 3 times, 4. I'm actually going to pull tight at that just for this example. So as you guys can see, I have my little loop here. I'm going to start pulling that tight. I think I screwed it up again. Oh, no. All right, so as you guys can see, it's not pretty, but I do have a knot there. All right, so you want to make sure you have that knot nice and tight. All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to take the leader line and do the same exact thing. As you guys can see, it slips up and down, which is what you want. So now we've got that one tied. We are going to do the same thing with this one, the red leader line. So we're going to create that loop again. I can actually get it to work. Pull that through a little bit. That is one key thing about this one. If you don't have enough of your leader line through to start your little loop, you can always pull it through if you do it the main line first, because it will already be tied on there. So you can just slide up and down. So we're going to go around the back. So you guys can see I have coming around the back of the leader line now and the main line. We're going to do the exact same thing we did with the first one. We're just going to create that loop. I'm going to pin that. And hope to God I'm as ambidextrous with my right hand as I am with my left. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now, when you're actually doing this with your line, you want to make sure you're doing more wraparounds on the braid than you are on the Flora Romano, only because you do want the extra strength on the braid, just because the diameter is usually smaller than the leader line. So you want the disparity to come from the braid, and you want it to be stronger on the braid side. So now that we have the leader line done, we're going to pull that. Maybe. So as you guys can see, knot formed beautifully. So what you should have is a knot here and a knot here. Now, I know this doesn't look like much right now, but you're about to see why I said tie on the main before you tie on the leader. Because now you got this little distance right here. What you're going to do is you're going to slowly pull them toward each other. Do that, just got to grab both lines and start pulling. And as you can see, it's starting to slide up. You can already see exactly how it's going to create the joining right there. So with that, all all you really got to worry about now is making sure that the knot is nice and tight. So you're going to grab both your tag ends and your main lines, pull them. As you guys can see, that's really not giving. And the best part about this is, since it is held together by 2 knots that are not coming loose right here, this will actually help improve the connection strength, because they're going to be pulling at each other. They're not going to be bending, not going to be twisting. They're just going to be pulling against each other. So they're going to create stops that will make it so they don't slide around or get in the way. The other cool part about this is, with this knot tied, because the diameters are usually so thin when you tie them, it will pass through your guides pretty easy. So this will be an easy knot to tie, especially in the field, as well as not hamper your casting ability. But yeah, there's not much to it. Let's go ahead and turn those tag ends so you guys can really see what it looks like. So we're going to go ahead and cut this one. And then you want to get that as close to the end of it as you can, just to avoid any entanglements when you're casting. If you tight it tight enough, it's not going to come loose, so don't worry about that. Cut that a little closer here. And that is what your knot should look like right there. So I've got my leader line down here and my main line right here. As you guys can see, that is definitely not giving, which is exactly what you want. All right, before I go, just a couple of tips on this one. When you're tying this one, my strong recommendation would be that you use like a 4 to 6 pound braid, especially if you're doing ultralight. I just feel like it's easier to cast with, to a fluorocarbon leader. Yes, fluorocarbon is a little more expensive, but especially if you're using this for active fishing, so like jigging or top water baits or anything like that, you definitely want the extra sensitivity and less give in the line, mainly so you can feel the bite strike when it hits, because as any of you who jig know, you usually only get one chance to set the hook on a mini jig or any other kind of jig. So fluorocarbon will give you the extra sensitivity to any strikes you get, especially with the braid on there. The other thing I would recommend would be to tie a 7.5 to 8 foot leader. I know that sounds insane, especially when you're going out there casting. But if you're anything like me and you're using a 7.5 or 8 foot rod, I use a 7.5. You gotta realize that it only sounds crazy until you realize that once you reel the connecting knots in to where your reel is, you're taking in 7.5 feet of line. So if you have it that far out, I like to have an additional 6 inches of line to cast with, so I don't have to worry about it. It definitely gives me a little more security, as well as makes it so I have a fair bit of distance between the knot and where my lure or mini jig is. Like I said, just a personal recommendation. I would just make sure you have something decent enough that you don't have the connection visible to the fish. And if you have to break off your bait at all, you do have some extra line to work with. So for me, I've broken this off quite a few times recently, and was thankful I had a 8 foot leader, because when I broke it off, I still had 7.5 or so to work with. It didn't impede me. It didn't stop me from fishing. It just tied on a new connection and got going. Beyond that, like I said, you can use mono with this. You can use any kind of combination of lines. I just prefer braid the fluoro for the extra sensitivity.